What is going on, my fellow Summit Chasers, and welcome to another episode of the Summit Chasers podcast, a podcast where we make success simple so that you can live extraordinary. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Summit Chasers podcast, and I'm absolutely thrilled to finally be in the presence of Lindsey McMillian-Stamen. Did I say that right?
Steamin', actually. Yep. Like steamin' vegetables.
Steamin' vegetables. I'm going to start over again. No, we're going to leave it in. We're going to leave it in because we're real here. We're authentic.
All right. Cool.
But you may also know her as LinkedIn Lindsey. She's a global speaker, LinkedIn expert and consultant, and all around a great person. We've had some great conversations already that have not been recorded. So I'm very excited to be able to share this with you. But thank you so much for being here, Lindsey.
Oh, thrilled to be here, Zach. Glad we're able to make it happen.
Beautiful. I am too. Fine. Like I said, it took us a couple months to get this, probably like 3 months actually, to be able to get this on here. We connected through a friend, Walker McKay, who was actually also on the podcast. I'll link his down below. That was a great sales focused podcast. But Lindsey, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself and your background without spilling all the good stuff really quickly before we get into some of the hard-nosed questions here.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm just so thrilled to be here with you, Zach, and bringing some new ideas and inspiration and motivation to your listeners. And my background has always been in sales. So in fact, our mutual friend Walker is who I've learned, I would say 99% of my sales skills through. The extra 1% is me messing up along the way and figuring it out by mistakes. So great episode, like you said, if your listeners haven't tapped into that one yet. I've been in sales my whole career, and I started in print sales, believe it or not. So literally selling ink on paper. People sometimes hear that and they're like, oh, Dunder Mifflin, I'm like, well, they're a paper company. They were actually our vendors. So, in the same field for sure. So, I think looking back, Zach, I've had just being an entrepreneur in my blood. My dad started his own business young in his career, took a big chance on the pursuit that he and his business partners were after. And so just following in somebody's footsteps can give you a head start that you might not realize, was going to be your path. So it's been a fun and challenging experience, to say the least, but one that I wouldn't trade for the world.
That's amazing. What are some of the biggest lessons maybe that you took from, first of all, if you haven't seen the episode with Walker is a great, especially sales expert, but a great person to have gained the 99% of your skills, your sales skills from. So that's a testament to how good your sales skills are. What's been the biggest takeaway? Because now you're moving into the social media ring, and we'll kind of get more specifically into that. But what skills in sales, hard or soft skills, do you think translated the most into being an entrepreneur, being a leader, and consulting with other individuals?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing when it comes to sales and being an entrepreneur is just getting curious. And you do that by asking really good questions. When you assume that you have all the answers, whether you're in sales or you're an entrepreneur, you are setting yourself up for absolute failure. I can't say that I haven't done that on the occasion in the past. And it's just kicked me in the butt because, when that ego and pride gets in the way, it leaves very little room for growth and learning. I have definitely experienced the whole phrase of, trying to be perfect and do it perfectly. And it's inhibited a lot of great opportunities on my journey because, I just assume that if I'm pursuing this, I should have it all figured out. And the reality is, Zach, and you know this, being an entrepreneur yourself, that you're never going to know all the answers until you just dive in and do it. And so sales is very similar in that sense, like being an entrepreneur, that, you can't run before you learn how to walk. And you just get better at that by practice. I just had a conversation yesterday with somebody and had a lesson from it. So I think any opportunity, any learning, any experience, taking that pause after the conversation, after the situation, and doing a little reflection to say, okay, what went well in that experience? What could have gone better? That's how we improve, and evolve, and just hone in on our craft, and really identify the things that we are uniquely gifted at, and maybe the things that we're not so strong at, and finding a who to help us bridge that gap where we might have some deficits.
No, that's really, really, really good advice. I had a conversation the other day. We have an intern that's working with us, and we brought up the concept of doing some cold calling, doing calls, and immediately blood goes out of the face, right? There's white, like, that's like so scary. And then immediately I'm like, it's okay. Like, what are you thinking right now? What are some objections maybe you have to doing this? And they're just like, what if I mess up? What if I don't know what I'm saying? What if they ask something that I don't know the answer to? What if all this? I'm like, yeah, I mean, all that stuff's probably gonna happen, and that's okay, right? That's okay. Like, and we say, what's this? Good is the, or sorry, perfect.
Perfect. Uh-huh.
Perfect is the enemy of good, right?
Yes.
Well, good is also like wanting to be good is sorry, being shitty. You need to be willing to be shitty first before you can even be good, right?
Yeah.
So he was just freaking out though this whole time, and it was because I remember being there, right? And this is the same when you're trying to learn how to ride a bike or start marketing, right? Getting on, trying to be successful on social media. A lot of times your first post isn't going to be the one that goes viral, right?
Hmm.
A lot of them are going to be duds, but you got to be willing to take those licks and to take those chances and kind of overcome those fears to eventually be great. Like another really great story, that's Mr. Beast. This is we're speaking to all our Gen Z people here now, and he was talking about Mr. Beast. He was talking about how his first videos, they would get like 100 views, and if you want to be a YouTube content creator, your first 100 videos are not going to do great, but you need to do that first 100 before you can get to 1,000, and those next 900 or whatever it is, they could get thousands of views, and then millions of views, right? And then he's at like multiple billion views now, but he's like, I wouldn't be here if I didn't make those first really crappy videos, type of
Yeah.
thing. Then we cut
Well,
ourselves
not
off,
to
and we're not willing
mention,
to be bad. Go ahead.
yeah, and
Sorry.
not to mention the fact that you have less of an audience when you're first starting out too, right? You're less likely to offend anyone or miss the opportunity because there's less people in the audience, right? So I
Mhm.
think that's also, as we're thinking back to whether we're a seasoned professional or we're a young professional starting something new, doing something new, it's remembering that I'm not good at this yet because I haven't developed and honed the skill, but also, especially when it comes to, like you gave the example of posting content or videos, I'm probably not going to get that much traction because I might not have that large of an audience or following to begin with anyway. So just get the process rolling. A few phrases that come to mind from what we're chatting about: it's awkward before it becomes elegant. Right?
Ooh, I like
It's this
that.
idea of like, you're probably gonna feel a little uncomfortable. You might actually make other people feel a little uncomfortable, and just being okay with that. But know that like the more you practice that craft, the more elegant and easy and natural and organic it becomes. And the other phrase, we were talking about perfection. Of course, we've all heard progress over perfection, but I love this one too. Perfection is for poor people. And as an
Ooh.
entrepreneur, right, if you are striving for perfection, my friend, you are climbing an impossible mountaintop that you will never summit, right? Because you are striving for the impossible. There's no such thing as anything that's perfect. So that perfection is for poor people is permission to those listeners who struggle with trying to get it absolutely perfect.
I wrote that one down. That's so true. It's just paralyzing, right? It's just so paralyzing trying to be perfect at everything, over analyzing everything. I mean, it's the paralysis or analysis paralysis. Yeah, it's huge. But shifting this back to content, particularly on a platform that you are the expert in, and I always get fascinated by professionals like yourself who focus on one platform over the other, as opposed to many who are just content creators or content consultants or marketers, right? Why, for you, why LinkedIn? What drew you to, I want to be the expert in LinkedIn and I want to help people succeed on LinkedIn?
Yeah, well, I mean, for several reasons. One, there weren't a whole lot of other options when I first started doing this. However many years ago it's been, over a decade plus. In fact, a lot of people don't realize this, but LinkedIn is actually older than Facebook. So one, there weren't as many options when I first started using it as a tool. And I started using it for my own professional career. I've been in sales, like I said, my whole career. And when I was in the DC metro area and one zip code had about hundreds, if not 1,000 different businesses that I could go and doors that I could knock on, I would actually use LinkedIn as my 21st century Rolodex to help me, one, be relevant and stay in front of all those people that I was doing leave behinds for, and when I was first starting my career, I used it as a tool for my own success. And so, being able to sell over $1 million in printing my first year of sales in a recession is something that I can attest that LinkedIn was a huge asset for me. And so being able to empower other people to navigate this tool for their own professional and personal success is just, I still think it's kind of a dream, right? Like who would have thought? I mean, it's more common now, as I'm sure you would agree, Zach, that there's people like me out there, and there's more of us growing, year over year with all the other social platforms out there. But it's just wild that that I have built a consulting business and helped thousands and thousands of people with my team to make more revenue for themselves, make more income for themselves, give them more confidence, give them more opportunity. And opportunity, in my opinion, isn't just sales and business, it's also relationships. My business tagline is connect with purpose. And that's my personal philosophy in life, and in leveraging this tool of LinkedIn is really using it as a way to nurture existing relationships or people that you want to meet and want to get to know, and also meet new people that you might not have otherwise met wherever you live or do business. So it's just, the possibilities are endless with this powerful tool.
I personally, LinkedIn's my favorite. I've met some what are now going to be long time really good friends, obviously from a business standpoint, and the content. I don't know, it's just more. I don't know. This is just a personal thing. I think it's more fun to post content on. I think it's more challenging because I picture the other individuals. I almost picture, like, and I mean this in a positive way. I picture like there's monsters on here. Like there's some very successful people, and I get to compete against them, right? And as a competitor, as a former professional athlete, that kind of fires me up. But that's just my perspective. For you and for others, why is LinkedIn kind of the preferred platform, or is it the preferred platform still for business owners and for professionals looking to advance their career? Why is it still, or is it still the preferred platform?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's been around the longest, so I think that alone gives it more credence over some of the other platforms that feel perhaps a little bit younger or more youthful, or even, some may feel like the other platforms are even more dated and not as active. LinkedIn was acquired by Microsoft in 2016 for $26.2 billion. So LinkedIn's not going anywhere anytime soon. Their corporate vision is to create economic opportunity for every person in the global workforce. So when we think about companies having visions and pursuing those visions, that acquisition by Microsoft really was a huge stepping stone in their pursuit of that vision coming to life and to reality. So is it a place to find jobs? Absolutely. It always has been. Is it a place to connect with prospects and vendors and collaborators and find your own talent for your team? Absolutely. It's all of those things in one platform. And it really has become, as younger generations are using the platform. I think it must have been at least 10 years ago at this point, Zach, LinkedIn lowered the in the United States, that's where I'm based, in South Carolina, but in the US, LinkedIn lowered the member age to 14 years old. And many people, were up in arms about, oh, that's too young to allow people on this platform. But the reality is, for someone like myself, and I would imagine someone like yourself, Zach, who has always been eager to be successful, driven to, be in this professional world, I would have much rather been on a platform like LinkedIn in high school and done an apprenticeship or an internship with a company than work at Bellacino's Pizza and Grinders. Now, there was definitely a development opportunity, and I learned a lot, is spilling hot pizza on cute college boys' laps, yes, true story. So certainly that job had its time and place. But it's this idea that LinkedIn is for all, right? There's really not an ageism, if you will. One of my clients, just real quickly, I'll share, was approaching 80 years old, had been retired for several years, and he was referred to me. And I thought to myself, why in the world is this gentleman even remotely interested in LinkedIn? He's retired. Well, Zach, come to find out, he is still to this day a major philanthropist, and knew that these large corporations that have big dollars to spend were and are present on LinkedIn. And he said, Lindsey, for me to get in the door and be relevant to these high rollers, big spenders who could influence the foundation that I'm representing, I've got to be on LinkedIn. Wow. Right? Like that's tremendous. So that age gap, there really isn't one, right? When we think of the power of LinkedIn.
Yeah. I mean, even just from like a parental standpoint, like me as a parent, I have a almost 7-year-old daughter now who's on YouTube, being influenced by that community. I would say that I would rather be influenced by the LinkedIn community, right? Like there's a lot of positive things on LinkedIn. There's a lot of people doing amazing things. There's a lot of people to look up to, posting inspirational things, posting valuable things. And then let's compare that to JoJo on YouTube. I, I would rather. I mean, it's almost a no-brainer in some cases, but yeah, I wish that I knew about LinkedIn when I was younger as well, because maybe I would have picked. Well, no, I probably wouldn't have picked a different path, but it would have been nice
Yeah,
to know.
exactly. Well,
Right? 'Cause
and
it
here's
was
the
kind of
thing.
a well-known
Here's
secret.
what I want to say, Zach, is like um, LinkedIn's not perfect, right? I would never be on a podcast, with anyone and say, oh, LinkedIn's the best platform out there and it's immune to hackers and spammers, and everyone on there is, I mean, listen, they're a software company, right? So they're not perfect either. They are very serious about security and privacy of their members. But is there garbage on the platform? Absolutely. There certainly is. And, every so often throughout the year, I will release an article that touches on that subject in some fashion, because I have worked with a lot of folks over the years who have a lot of trepidation about LinkedIn. And there's ways to make it work for you if you know how to work it. But I think it's fair to at least also acknowledge that it's not a perfect platform. It still has its, faults, just like any one of us humans does as well.
Well, like you said, perfect rarely exists, so it makes a lot of sense, right? It's just how much can we mitigate that negative influence, and I think they do a great job, and so do some other platforms as well. Which kind of brings me, actually, it's a great segue into Mike's question, which is what is LinkedIn inherently? What is its strong suit, and then what would you maybe not use it for? What would other platforms be better for as far as generating a specific outcome?
That's such a great question. So Well, I think this goes back to what your belief and philosophy and approach is with LinkedIn, and not everyone takes the same approach. So, my personal belief and approach to the platform of LinkedIn is remembering that it's a human tool. So, and by that I mean the receivers of people who receive our messages in, in our inbox or in their inbox, or our posts, or people who come to our profile and read about us and consume our content. They're human beings. And so to me, I like to talk about this platform of LinkedIn as a human tool, and that it's a place to validate your reputation as a professional. It's also a place to nurture and build your relationships with people.
Mhm.
So LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make it more of a human platform. I've noticed in the last about 12 months or so, more and more individuals are asking me the question, well, what should I do with my company page? And how should my company be represented? And what should I do with company posts? And those aren't bad questions, but they're often not the right first questions to ask.
Mhm.
We want to think about our LinkedIn experience as the individual or the person. And in LinkedIn terms, that relates to our profile. So any success you're going to have on the platform, the foundation of that success is the way you, the individual, look on the platform. Everything else comes as secondary and, a byproduct of that, including your company footprint. People are engaging with people on LinkedIn. Now, the disclaimer and asterisk and caveat is that over the last year or so, and this is probably why the questions have become more common, LinkedIn has given us a lot more capabilities for companies to interact with people on the platform, such as a company page inbox, commenting as a company. And that's all good and well. And I think it's pretty cool, and it keeps people engaged and interested, and it keeps my business afloat because it's more for me to teach my clients and equip them with. And it still goes back to that foundation of human to human connection. So so going back to the second part of your question, um, I'll rag on one segment of professionals, and they are not all created equal. So this is certainly a stereotype, and not everyone falls into this stereotype. But the professionals that, at least in my personal network, that I see using LinkedIn the least effectively would be residential realtors. They have this misconception that LinkedIn is a place to post all of their listings, and what that comes across as is a megaphone and 90 billboards just shouting at their network of, check out this listing, check out this listing. And LinkedIn, that's just not the place. Can you sprinkle in listing? I'm not opposed to that, but your people's experience of you on LinkedIn should be the full version of you, not just what you're selling. It should also be, if let's just go with the realtor track for a moment, it should also be teaching your audience and your network how to prepare for the sale, how to prepare for the buy, all the considerations. There's a plethora of topics in the residential real estate space that should be considered beyond just posting and praying that somebody's going to buy your listing. So it's a little bit of a crude example, but just to give you an idea of the way that platform of LinkedIn should not be used.
No, that's really good advice. It's, I guess we have a few clients that are in that space as well, and that's one of the focuses that we did too, is that they were so focused on posting their listings that they had come up, or even, we just flipped this one for X amount, showing off, which is, you want to do both at some point. You want to show your successes, and then show some of your products and some of the, what they can expect as far as inventory when working with you, type of thing. But what's really made the big difference is just them adding value, is them
Yes.
supporting those in the buying process, supporting their ideal, their ICP, their ideal customer profile, and adding value and speaking to them. Because that's one thing. That's one thing that I'm kind of on board with AI, and not at the same time, is it's actually bringing back a lot of, and the importance of, authentic relationships. And you've alluded to that a few times now. Is those authentic relationships that are consistent, their brand consistent, their message consistent, and they solve the problems of the people that you want to work with. And I mean, to your point, if you're if you're a realtor and your ideal customer profile is somebody wanting to buy their forever home in this particular area, in this age range, right, in this they have this much money, right, they make this much money, then you need to be speaking to them, solving their problems. And a lot of times it's, I've never had to buy a home before. That's that I could potentially live for the rest of my life in. I want to make sure I get this right, and I have to sell another home, so I haven't done that before either. So how do I do that? So getting in their head, and what are they thinking about? What are what keeps them up at night? What stresses them out, and solve for that. Give them information to make it easier for them. Because let's say you're the one that gives them some of the best advice that makes them feel a little bit less stressed and like they're going to be okay. Who are they more likely to work with? Probably, I mean, I would guess probably you. Right?
Absolutely.
You already have
Absolutely.
proof. And there was something that you said at the beginning of that, and I was trying really hard to keep it in my head. Well, there's one thing that you said when you started that answer was, and I can't remember what it was now. Give me a minute. If I have to cut this, I will. But it was around. Oh no. Yeah, I'm definitely have to cut this. I can't remember what it was.
It's
It was in my
okay.
head, and then as I started to ask the question, it just disappeared. And this happens a
Let's
few
see. I
times.
was talking about oh, before I talked about realtors, I was talking about starting with the person. It's a human tool, not the companies.
Yeah.
I'm not sure anything around that.
No. That's good. It'll probably come back to me because it was so strong. So it was around. What are some of the? Let me jump to this
Yep.
actually. What when they're putting out content and this kind of stuff, and they're getting advice from other people, what are some of the misconceptions around content, other than don't just post, hey, I'm selling this house now, hey, I'm selling this house now, or hey, I have this product, buy. What are some of the like pieces of content or content strategies that you see on there that just make you cringe a little bit?
Yeah, great question. The idea that people again, I think I go back to asking the wrong questions in right questions in the wrong order. Let me rephrase that. So it's not a bad question to ask, how do I make my content the best, the juiciest, the most valuable, to get the most impressions and the most engagement? That's not a bad question. It's just not the right immediate question. So
Mhm.
what we want to consider is, who is in our network? What are they interested in? What are they engaging with? What are they talking about? And then letting those pieces of information influence what we post. Here's the other thing too. You could have the best posting strategy on the planet and the best content on the planet, but there's two things you have to keep in mind that are really, I see often neglected in LinkedIn, especially when I'm working with business owners and executives. And that is um, remembering that even the best content, even the best posting strategy means nothing if you don't have a solid LinkedIn profile. All of that content, all of those people turn eyeballs back on you. And if you haven't invested in that full, I mean, Zach, are over 24 sections of the LinkedIn profile. It's why we have a 5-step trademark process called the Profile Transformer. It's our project-based engagement that we've taken 1,000 clients through at this point, where we do the heavy lifting because we're the experts, right? And so remember that your LinkedIn profile is foundational to any success, including any content that you post on the platform. So that's kind of part one. Part two is that assuming that posting is enough. That's not enough. I always recommend people thinking about a wheel, right? A wheel can't move unless it has spokes in it. And so one of those spokes is the profile. One of those spokes is your people, right? Your connections, the people who make up your network. Another spoke is your actual engagement with other people's content. So we can't assume that just posting and praying the content is going to be the best strategy. We also have to remember that it's this idea of give to get, right? So when I say give, it's about, yes, giving your content and having posting consistently and having that full breadth of types of content that you're putting out there. And it's having a healthy balance of engaging with other people's content. And Zach, I know you know this, but for your listeners, that activity, what you're engaging with, is publicly visible. So when one of the criteria, I'll give one of my little secret sauce data points, when I'm assessing somebody on LinkedIn, that's something that I'm looking at. I'm looking at how often they're posting content. I'm looking at how often they're engaging with other people's content, what they're saying, what they're posting, how they're posting, what their captions are or not, what their captions aren't if they don't have those, right? So there's so many other little data points to this platform to make it a successful experience for yourself and for others, opposed to just, again, what's the best content strategy and what's the best thing I should be posting. It's much more involved than that if you really want to use it the right way.
You definitely answered the question that I couldn't remember. I still don't remember what it was, but I know that answered it because I could feel it. That was
Okay, cool.
amazing. So we talked about being authentic a few times now on here. I see a lot of, and this is one thing that initially I think could intimidate some, and it used to with me years ago. So you look at people's profile, and there's a lot of, they use big words. Sometimes you read their bios or whatever it is, and it doesn't even make sense because they're just trying to make themselves sound super duper smart, right? What would your advice be to, obviously a lot of it's about showing your professionalism, proof that you can do what you say you can do, and it's almost like an advanced resume sort of thing, right? What would your advice be to getting that, achieving that, so the proof, right, and proof that you're a professional in or an expert in XYZ, but also keeping that authentic feel? Because again, I some people's bios I'll go to, or profiles I'll go to, and I'm just like, this is written by your ego only.
Right.
Right. So what's that kind of mix? What's
Yeah.
the sweet spot there?
So the sweet spot is, if you're doing it on your own, to write it in first person and make it sound like you or your voice. And there's always an and bring somebody else in to give you feedback. So whether that's a colleague, a boss, a mentor, a spouse or partner, having people speak into what you're saying about yourself, not only can it maybe bring that ego down a notch if something sounds a bit too braggadocious, but also it's more often the case that you're forgetting a really important achievement or a really important piece about who you are, how you show up, or what your approach is. So bringing somebody into helping you with that is really powerful. And that's where, again, going back to the profile transformer, that engagement that we have clients go through is that's our sweet spot, right? The power of that experience for our clients is that we actually interview them. So Zach, if you were going to go through that, we actually have a phone call together, and I'm hearing how you say things, hearing how you communicate what you do and who you serve and how you show up. Your goal with your LinkedIn profile, whether it's me helping you with it or a colleague or a friend, is making sure that someone can hear your voice. So I had a client call me about 6 weeks after we launched his profile. He was already on LinkedIn. His profile was mediocre at best, definitely not a reflection of his 17 years of experience in his field. And he called me about 6 weeks after launching his profile and transforming it. And he said, Lindsey, I've got this really, really exciting story. I've been dying to call you. I'm like, great. Like, what's going on? He goes, just landed a huge client, and she and I have become fast friends. She's a high-powered C-suite executive. She's actually been on my prospect list for over 6 months, and she's become a client. I'm like, wow, man, congratulations. That's awesome. But Zach, in my head, I'm thinking, why is he calling me, right? Like, I didn't teach him how to use LinkedIn. I took him through the profile transformer. But I'm listening. I'm like, wow, that's awesome. Congrats. And he said, yeah, so she and I have become fast friends. And I asked her, I said, like why us? Why my team? Why our firm? He said, because I got to assume you've got people like me pounding on your door, every week. She goes, oh, you wouldn't believe, right? Because she's so successful and she's great and she attracts people. People want to work with her. And she said, but you know what? She says to him, it was pretty simple. You were the person in real life who I researched online. And he said, what do you mean online? And Zach, she responded like almost flippantly. She goes, your LinkedIn profile. He said, so Lindsey, I'm calling to thank you. He said, because not only did I not realize that my LinkedIn profile, the way I look on this platform, was not only impacting and influencing people's decision to take my call, but it was influencing their decision on whether or not to hire me and engage my team. And I'm calling to tell you thank you, because she might very well be my biggest client this year. Like mic drop moment, right? And so that's the power, that's the influence that the way that we show up on this platform can have on our future opportunities.
Well, it really makes sense. Like even when you send a connection request or a compelling piece of content or a message that you send out, where are they going to go first? Whether they're going to decide to answer you to your profile and then maybe to your website. But that's like your landing page on there.
It
That's like,
is,
let me
and
see
it's
who this
publicly
person is.
visible.
Yeah. No, absolutely. No, that's really, really good advice. Speaking of good advice, let's go the opposite. What's some of the worst advice you've seen given on whether it's profiles, LinkedIn profile, or the usage of LinkedIn in general? What's the worst piece of advice you've seen out there?
Oh gosh. So how much time do we have? I'm just kidding. I'll pick a
We got an
couple of
hour.
the tops. So just like Google loves keywords, so does LinkedIn. And just like I mentioned a moment ago, your LinkedIn profile is publicly visible. So if any of your listeners have ever wanted to have their own website, and they're on LinkedIn, congratulations, you have your own website. It's called your LinkedIn profile. So people don't even have to be on LinkedIn to see your LinkedIn profile, which is a fact that most people are not aware of. So with that, what is so cringy, and I thankfully see it less and less and less, but steer clear and run fast and far away if you ever talk to a quote unquote LinkedIn expert who can help you with the way you look on the platform. And ultimately, their philosophy is to chock it full of keywords and have 22 concurrent, roles. And it's tacky, it's tasteless. It's clearly trying to rig the system and rig the algorithm, which by the way, we haven't gone down this path, but in case it was on your list of questions, I'm going to address it right now, Zach, regarding the algorithm. At this point of the recording of this episode, LinkedIn is very hush-hush about their algorithm. So unless you get the fact and data from a LinkedIn employee or from LinkedIn corporate regarding anything related to the algorithm, we actually don't know. Unlike other platforms that are very transparent about their algorithm, and that's where I always say, you don't even 99.9% of the people I work with don't even need to worry about the algorithm, because they have so many foundational steps they need to work on in the first place before even thinking for a moment about the algorithm. So I digress, but I think maybe that's even bad advice too, is saying, oh, well, this is what you should do for the algorithm. It's like, well, no, that's actually not true, because you don't know unless you, like I said, work for LinkedIn and have a direct, link to that source. So was that enough? Was that a soapbox moment? I felt like a soapbox moment, but
that was
I'll
amazing.
step off my
That was amazing.
soapbox.
No, that was great, and that was on my list. It was to talk about the algorithms and how it differs from other platforms. But I guess a big difference is you just don't. They keep it hush hush. You don't know.
Yeah, here's what I'll say is, not dissimilar from other online platforms. At the end of the day, all of these social tools are software companies. They're never in a state of perfection. In fact, Reid Hoffman was one of the co-founders of LinkedIn. He wrote a book years ago called The Startup of You. And one of the concepts they taught in that book is perpetual learning, I think it was. And they used an infinity symbol. And it's this idea, I think I'm getting that phrase right. Reid, if you're listening, I'm sorry, I messed this up, but it's a perpetual beta. There we go. Perpetual beta. is the idea that we are never in a state of perfection. Seems to be the theme of our conversation. We're always iterating, we're always evolving. And so LinkedIn, again, not dissimilar from any software company, they're always evolving. They're adding new features, they're rolling off features, they're testing things, they're pulling them back. LinkedIn is always moving, always changing. And going back to one of your earlier questions, Zach, why LinkedIn for me? Honestly, LinkedIn is hard enough to keep up with as it is. So I just stay in my LinkedIn sandbox. I can't imagine trying to be an expert in any other field. And quite honestly, going back to one of the main differences of LinkedIn and other platforms being that we don't know much about the algorithm, I actually think that's okay. It gives us permission to not be afraid to test things out. And usually if LinkedIn, here's one little tip I'll give you and your listeners is that if you observe a new feature on LinkedIn, what we have seen is that you might get more visibility if you actually test out that feature. So that's about the extent to which we can say regarding LinkedIn's algorithm. But I always say, don't be afraid to get in there and click the buttons. LinkedIn is a very busy platform, which can really overwhelm a lot of people. But chances are, even if something doesn't look clickable, it is clickable and can take you down a new path that can create a new opportunity for you.
I love what you said about not knowing the algorithm is almost a good thing, because then you just focus on putting out good content and having that good foundation in your profile. And you don't get, because one of the things that, like, I've been on LinkedIn, or not LinkedIn, I've been on Instagram the last few days, and there's this weird trend going around because the algorithm, I guess, favors it really favors really short videos. Like, when I say short videos, I mean like half a second. And then you put up a text, so you need to, in order to read the text, you're technically watching the video 10 to 20 times because it's a half a second video, and it is so annoying. And then they put in this audio that's trending, and it's like this weird beep. So you're sitting there trying to read this thing, and it's just beeping at you. You feel like you're gonna have a stroke.
I'm already tired.
It's brutal, because, and then the only reason they're doing it is because they're just trying to beat the algorithm. They're not trying to put out good content. It's trash content, but they're just trying to beat the algorithm, as opposed to, let's just put out good content that my viewers and subscribers or followers want to see, that would add value to them, and they want to watch, whether that value is entertainment, information, education, whatever it is. But if you're kind of blind to it, you can just focus on being authentic.
Yeah, that's such I never considered that, Zach. That's a great perspective on, and really blessing that we have not having that transparency. So, yeah, thanks for sharing that. That's a great point.
Yeah, so don't go on Instagram. It's terrible. Yeah, no, it's really bizarre. So what on LinkedIn, you made an amazing success story, by the way. I think that's a great case study. You had your client who got the client, I guess, after them being in their pipeline for 6 months. Now, for others, what's kind of a big missing step, or maybe a misconception, between taking somebody from a consumer of your content, consumer of your information on LinkedIn, to becoming somebody who is aware that they have a problem, then aware that you can solve their problem, and turns into a possible prospect for you? What is kind of a big missing step that a lot of people miss when kind of closing that gap?
Yeah, I think the misconception I see the most is that people want to think that LinkedIn is the magical unicorn, that they get the perfect message, the perfect outreach language, and all of their sales struggles will evaporate and they'll get all this influx of leads. And the reality is that I go back to connecting what I shared earlier, in that it's a human tool, and the recipients on the other line of what you're posting and sending and are human beings too. And so that means that one message, one outreach, one invitation, one post, one comment, like isn't enough, you know? Sometimes it is. I'm not saying never say never, but you know, so my birthday's in March and I have a birthday strategy that I teach my clients and I apply it to my own business, which was a good reminder for me this year. My business coach said, Lindsey, you need to get back to practicing what you preach. And sure enough, Zach, I started doing again what I teach my clients, and we're on track to have our best year ever. So like, go figure, right? But the idea that, you know, there was this person in my network who reached out to me initially to say he wanted a conversation. And for one reason or another, we never scheduled the call. He went dark. I stopped following up and I just kind of let it sit. Well, he engaged with one of my posts and I reached out to him directly and just said, thanks so much for the recent engagement. Realized that you and I actually never connected when we tried to make that happen last year. What do you say we make it a go this time? Question mark, right? Always. So I think that's, again, I'm kind of answering your question in a very roundabout way and through a story, but ultimately he said, yes, we got the call. He became a client. So it's remembering that LinkedIn is a nurturing platform, and also remembering that it doesn't have to stay in LinkedIn. I teach several strategies that help my clients and help my students, if you will, if they're, you know, in an audience at one of my speaking engagements, that that we have to remember LinkedIn isn't everybody's entry point, and that's okay. So we want to give them other ways to communicate and reach us outside of the platform. So I think that is one of the reminders to your listeners is that LinkedIn is not the only way. And even LinkedIn Lindsey is here to say that, right? We still have to remember, like you said, with your intern and cold calling, we got to pick up the phone and call people. I did that the Friday before I went on vacation. Got an email from a prospect who said, yeah, I hear a couple of other questions I have. Let me know if you want to hop on a quick call. And so I actually just picked up the phone and called them and we had a 6-minute conversation and they became a client instead of me just replying and answering their questions via email. And I realized, oh, the phone, I remember this actually works. And so I remembered that day I was supposed to hear from another prospect who I had not heard from yet. And I picked up the phone and called him, didn't leave a voicemail. He ended up actually texting me a few minutes later saying, hey, sorry, I missed your call. We're a go. What's our next step? So, I mean, those two instances, Zach, aren't even about LinkedIn, right? But it's this idea that when we're thinking about building our businesses and prospecting and selling, we have to think of the global, the whole wheel, right? And all the spokes in the wheel, not just that LinkedIn is the only way.
No, that's really good advice. You know, LinkedIn could be, it's the foundation. It could be the thing that connects you and initially kind of proves your expertise or the fact that you have the solution to their problem. But sometimes you got to pick up the phone or answer an email or a text message or anything else. Move it over to X. I don't know.
Yeah.
But no, that's really good advice. And I think that people think, okay, I'm going to use a LinkedIn content strategy. I just got a marketing strategy, I guess a more full funnel marketing strategy. We just got to keep it on LinkedIn, but you don't. It all has to work together. So I like that flywheel concept. Absolutely. So let's say somebody wanted to get in touch with you and wanted to work with you. How would they do that, Lindsey?
Yeah, well, LinkedIn is a great place to start, but here's the caveat. Don't just send me a blank invitation with no personalization. I am very selective on who I add to my network. So if I have no idea who you are or that you heard me on this podcast with you, Zach, I'm not going to promise that we're going to connect. So send me a personalized invitation, engage with my content. Let me know that's where you heard me. Certainly you can find me on my website, mcmillionconsulting.com. And, something else that I think is important for me to address, if I may, do we have another minute or two to share another thought?
Yep, go ahead.
So you've asked me several questions just regarding like misconceptions and, not just best practices, but what are the things that we should be, have our radar up. And that is assuming that strategies for other platforms, let's just say Instagram, for example. I know you can use certain strategies with other platforms, but we'll say Instagram. Instagram has several plugins where you can really build a high funnel, big funnel, and attract people to your webinar and so forth. LinkedIn, and I'm saying this from personal experience. I joined a coaching program a year or two ago, and I was just in a 90-day trial phase with them. And one of the things that they were teaching, in this case, me as a student in their cohort, was how to apply this kind of automated approach that works on other platforms to LinkedIn. And what they found was that the success rate or hit rate, and in their words, in their terms, success was ultimately getting a call scheduled and then closing the deal once they were on the call. But here's what they actually learned. They only got to that getting on the call and then trying to close because what they were originally trying, Zach, was trying to close the deal in LinkedIn, in direct messages. And people, I'm not suggesting people want to be sold in the other platforms, but it just tends, for whatever reason, to work better in those other platforms. It's more of a, it just does. And I'm not an expert in those other platforms. So what they did was they said, okay, trying to actually close the deal on LinkedIn is really not working. So let's actually just try to get people to the call or to the appointment. And they saw some increased success of that. But here's a byproduct of taking that automated approach with LinkedIn. It's that several times throughout the year, I'll have somebody reach out and say, oh, Lindsey, I tried an automation company at one point and I had mild success, or it didn't work. And now I have X thousands of connections. And I say, oh, Zach, what percentage of those connections do you actually know? And you would reply, oh, maybe 1%. Right. So then I take them through this process to really start squeezing some juice out of their existing network of LinkedIn. So just be mindful if you want to take an automated approach to LinkedIn. Again, I'm not saying it's not the right approach or a wrong approach, but just consider the consequences or maybe unintentional byproducts that can result from taking that automated approach.
No, that's great advice, because I get approached all the time from people saying that they could send out 20,000 LinkedIn messages a month and book me blah, blah, blah amount of appointments, whatever it is. But this is actually, this is a good, I'm glad that we're going down this path. How does that affect, especially let's say you're a thought leader, or, your business is fairly new. One of the, you're really trying to create, your the perception, other people's perception of you. You're trying to create an image. How does that method of sending out thousands of messages, connection requests to people who they might not even be on LinkedIn anymore, or they're not even doing, they're not in the same industry that your ICP is in, or whatever it is. What are some of the maybe not so obvious negative effects of that?
Well, here, I'm going to answer your question with a question. Do you get a feeling or a sense when you're receiving a message from somebody that's been automated?
Oh yeah, I get a feeling.
Yes, so do I. And guess who else does? All of the other recipients who are receiving the automated message, right? So, I mean, case in point, mic drop. I think that's the thing, right? Is people sniff it out. LinkedIn's, again, a human place to think of it like an online networking event. Some of your listeners probably just got cold chills and are going to stop listening right now. But it's this idea that, to really make LinkedIn work, it's a long game. It's not, it can be a quick win. I mean, my client that I used as an example is, and I have tons of other examples of that over the last decade plus, but really thinking about you taking a slower, more intentional, thoughtful approach is the way to go. And just assuming, because here's the other thing, Zach, a lot of people will, if you're going to go the automated route, for it to really work, you got to have it better be backed by lots of people doing a lot of engagement. And at the end of the day, if I'm being honest with you and with your listeners, could you really handle 1,000 leads in 1 week? Do you really have the manpower to have 92 phone calls on Monday morning as one person, right? So again, unless you've got a team to back up that type of activity, I'm not really sure it's the right route to go.
No, I couldn't agree more. And this is a very similar thing that we focus on as well from a more, full funnel, not full funnel, but a 30,000 foot view business standpoint is, especially, it's getting to the end of the year. You have quotas that you need to hit, or maybe your business isn't growing as much as you were hoping, or you're so used to the big spike your business had during COVID and you're like, where did it all go now? And then we get into this like stressed, short-sighted decision-making mindset of, okay, I'm just going to take the easy route. I'm going to hire this company for a couple $1,000. They're going to send out, however many connection requests and thousands of messages, and then I'm just going to get what I can get out of that, so I can go put out fires over here, as opposed to taking a step back, setting up the foundations properly, right? Figuring out, okay, what does my profile look like? What message am I trying to give out? How do I want to appear on basically my landing page, right? That everybody can see. What type of content do I want to put out? How can I put out content that is valuable, solves, helps to at least identify that I can solve my ICP's problem, and that I should be the one that they should look more into. They should, take into consideration when they're window shopping for people to solve their problem. And then if you do that consistently, right, over a period of time, authentically, in 6 months from now or a year from now, it is going to be an exponential return on my resource investment, resource being, money, time, and energy. Again, as opposed to, oh no, we got to hit this number right now. I want to get results tomorrow. Let's just sell my soul and completely screw my, my image, right? For years
Yeah,
to come too.
absolutely.
And it's a big, I think that's a good lesson in general, like whether it's in fitness. Don't do the crash diet. Develop the
Right.
habits that takes more time to become healthier long term. Don't just, sell your soul to, an outreach company. Figure out what works for your ICP, listen to your ICP, and then solve their problems. Don't just hire the first person that comes in. Create a hiring process that works using data and go through it consistently. There's a lot of lessons in that same concept. So I love that you
Yeah.
brought that up at the end.
Absolutely. And I'll say this too, that it might take 6 months, but my client Mike, he had an automation company that he was using. He filled his network with a bunch of people he didn't know. He implemented one of our strategies, and in the month of December, one of the quietest, lowest sales, months, and he's in a service-based business, so not selling, wrapping paper, in the month of December, he booked 40 meetings. In that month of December, 40 meetings were booked. So, I think again, it's this idea that but he had intention, he was being real, he took his time, so the success can come, but it's like we've said from the get-go and several times, is just really being authentic, taking the human approach, and remembering that LinkedIn is not the only touch point in people's experience with you.
I love it. I love it when we go to end a podcast and then we talk for 10 more minutes,
There you go.
because it's flowing so great. No, I absolutely love it. But one more time, so everybody who's still listening can remember where to find you. Where can they find LinkedIn Lindsey if they want to work with you?
Absolutely. Well, obviously you could probably Google LinkedIn Lindsey. And I think at this point I do come up, which is pretty cool. I'm Lindsey. Obviously find me on LinkedIn. Zach, I'm sure you'll attach my name and LinkedIn profile. Go to our website. I've got some free guides and other ways that we can help you. And if you've got an event coming up where you're looking for a professional speaker, then don't hesitate to reach out, because we're always filling the calendar to get in front of more people and make a bigger impact.
Absolutely. And I highly recommend her. But Lindsey, I have one more question, one that I ask everybody at the end of my podcast. But for you, the LinkedIn Lindsey, what is the next summit that you are chasing?
Oh, the next summit I am chasing is really choosing to be generous, more generous with my intelligence, with my time, with my gifts, with my finances. It's something that I kind of ebb and flow in. And Zach, I'm just really focused on how I can do that on a more consistent basis, so that it's just a natural byproduct of who I am, instead of feeling that pressure to like get something out of it every time I'm pursuing a conversation. So really choosing to be more generous, and I think the summit doesn't feel as scary because I surround myself with people who are far more generous than I think I'll ever be. So they're good vibes, kind of have rubbed off on me, and so it's a fun journey, and one that I'll probably be pursuing for a lifetime.
I love it. Well, there you have it, everybody. Not just a LinkedIn expert, but also a very generous and amazing human being. Lindsey McMillian Stamen. I said it right, though. Steamin vegetables. I got it this time. That analogy was perfect.
You're,
But thank you
you're great.
so very much for coming on. Beautiful, everybody. All right. Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Summit Chasers podcast. Remember, everybody, keep chasing your next summit.